Yes, it is 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and yes, I am drinking a Cheetos and Diet Coke. I needed some alcohol to watch my own videos. Hi friends, my name is Jess and welcome back to my channel, Books Past Bedtime, and welcome to another day of Bookmas. So today, as you can probably tell by the title, I'm going to be going back and watching the TBRs that I've posted this year in 2022 and seeing if I've actually read the books that I put on my TBRs. So my prediction is that I actually think that I have probably read a lot of the books that I put on my TBRs, just maybe not in the months that I put them on my TBR. But I'm not actually sure. I remember some books that were on TBRs, and I know that I put the same book on multiple TBRs in multiple months because sometimes it just takes me a while to get to my reading plans, even though usually I do eventually get to them. I could be totally wrong. Who knows? The only way we're gonna find out is if we watch and see. So I know that I posted TBRs up through August or September, and I don't think that I've posted one. I think September was the last month I did a TBR. Since then, I've just been working on end of the year reading plans as a whole and not wanting to spoil what I'm doing, particularly for Bookmas. So yeah, I think we have 9 or 10 videos that we're going to check out and see if I have read the books that I have set for myself to read. I'm going to scoot over a little bit so I can put the video up here. But the first video, of course, that we're going to be watching is my January TBR. Now, I'm not going to just sit here and watch all of the video. We're just going to kind of scrub through to find the books that I'm going to talk about, so don't get too excited. Okay, so the first book I put on my TBR was Frat Wars by Saxon James, and I'm pretty sure it was because I had already read it in January by the time that I filmed this video, because I did definitely read this book. It was the first book that I read in 2022, so point for me. Alright, and the next book I talk about is A Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. Again, I feel like I had probably already read this by the time I filmed this video and was just throwing it on here to have a book already crossed off the list, because I did read this one of my favorites in 2022, so this one is complete as well. And then those two books really jump-started my male romance kick for the year, so I put Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall on this TBR as well, and I did read this one in January also, so we're doing good so far. That's 3 of 3. Okay, and then next I was talking about my book club books, so The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Jensen I did read for Fantasy Series Book Club, so that one is a check as well. And then I also talked about the second book in that series, The Traitor Queen, which we also read for Fantasy Series, and I also completed. I think I might have read this one in February, but I did read it, so. And then we have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I did read this one. I don't think I probably read it until February or March, but I did read it this year. And I did post a reading vlog that I included this book in, where I read some hyped TikTok romances, so if you haven't seen that, you can check that out. I'll link that up in the cards and down below. And then I also had How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Helly Black on my TBR as well. I think that I read it for the Buzzwordathon. I didn't complete, but in January I was doing it, so I did read this book in January. Yeah, and I'm killing it. My next little category is thrillers, and I think these were all part of the Goodreads thriller video that I did last year, so you can check that out. I'll link that video as well if you're interested. So I hopefully have read all of these as well. Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins I did read for that video. Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manasal I read that book as well for that video. And then Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. I actually DNF'd this one, but I technically read it for my own purposes of counting the book. And then Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby I definitely read. I loved this book so much. One of my favorites of 2022. So glad I read this one. So this one is definitely a check as well. And next we had Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. Read this one as well for that same video. Billy Summers by Stephen King, also a check, also read for that same thriller video. And then I think these next few books were books that I was finishing up for my Reading Books Like a Young Royals reading vlog, so that is what If We Were Us by K.L. Walther was featured in. I'll link that one as well if you're interested. I love that video, probably one of my favorites that I've made this year. I actually kind of made it half last year and half this year, but it's a good one. I love it, and I love Young Royals. So A Lesson in Vengeance was also in that video by Victoria Lee, so this one was read also. And those were all the books that I put on my January TBR, so there was 15 total books, and I have read all 15 of them, so that is awesome. Very proud of myself. We'll see if I keep this up throughout the rest of the year. Next, we can watch my February TBR. Alright, so I do at the beginning of this video have a January carryover section. So I did have How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories on here, as well as it looks like Harlem Shuffle, A Lesson in Vengeance, and The Love Hypothesis. So those books I guess I didn't read in January, but I did read them eventually. I don't even know if I read them in February, but they're read, so they count. The first new book that I put on my February TBR was Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, and I did read this one. This was probably my favorite coho book that I have read in 2020, but also I've only read Colleen Hoover in 2020, so it's my favorite Colleen Hoover book that I've read. Next, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I did read this one, probably one of my favorite thrillers of the year, other than Razorblade Tears. I really liked it. I thought it was really good. So that one is a check as well. Next, I had The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This was a book that I read with the Fantasy Series Book Club, and I loved this one. I gave it 5 stars. It kind of surprised me how much I loved it, but it was super good, and so obviously I've read this one as well. And then I had like an entire co-host section, so I talked about Reminders of Him Again, and also It Ends With Us was listed on there. I did read that one. I actually had planned to do a Colleen Hoover reading vlog, but I ended up scrapping it. I don't know, it didn't feel like me. I'm glad I read the books just so like I know how I feel about Colleen as an author. Generally, I think she's not for me. That wasn't the direction I wanted to take my channel in, so I ended up scrapping that video and not finishing it. I don't know. I did read all these books. So Regretting You by Colleen Hoover I also read. Ugly Love was a book that I completed as well. And last but not least, I did read Verity. Also, I just mentioned in when I was reacting to my January video that I had read like some hyped TikTok book talk romances. The Spanish Love Deception was included in that vlog as well, so I did end up reading this one by Elena Armas. And then the third book in that video was It Ends With Us, so I also read that one. My next section was new queer romance releases. I can't talk. I think I was thinking about doing a vlog of those, and I kind of wish I hadn't. I was in like a weird content slump kind of all year, but particularly at the beginning of the year, so that ended up getting scrapped as well. But I do think that I read all the books that I was going to talk about in that video. The first one here, Something Fabulous by Alexis Hall, I did indeed read. I'm So Not Over You by Kasoko Jackson, I did read. I actually don't think I read it until last month. I read it in September or October, so it took me a long time to actually get around to this one, mostly because I kind of wanted to DNF it every time I tried to start it, but it is read. I did end up reading it. And then Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. I'm pretty sure this one I actually read in February, so. And then I talked about Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, which I definitely did not read in February. I think that I read this one again in like August or September, so it took me a while, but I did read it and I did love it. I wish I'd read it earlier. And that looks like all the books I had on my February TBR, so let me count up my stats for this one again. I'm just gonna count new books, not books that I mentioned in January. So my February TBR, I gave myself 12 new books to read that were in addition to the ones that I didn't finish in January. And of those 12 books, I haven't read all 12. So we're still doing great. I've still read all of the books that I have set for myself, but let's move on to March. So just from the thumbnail of the March video, I can already tell that there was a ton of carryover from last month to March. February was really the month that I dived into Kindle Unlimited romances, so I think that's probably why I strayed from my TBR and had to put so many more on my March TBR that I was trying to read in February. I still think that I probably have eventually read all of these books, especially the repeats. I've already talked about them, but let's go through it and see what I've gotten on here. So yeah, my February carryover section is half the length of the videos. I have on here The Poppy War, which of course I've read, It Ends With Us, which of course I've read, The Love Hypothesis again, which of course I have read, but it took me a while, The Spanish Love Deception as well, I've read that one, Reminders of Him I have read also, Ugly Love, Regretting You, Delilah Green, I'm So Not Over You. It probably will be interesting to see which book I put on the most TBRs as well. Right now The Love Hypothesis is in first place with 3 separate TBRs that it's been on, but I have a feeling that I'm So Not Over You or Delilah Green might make the most TBRs because they're both at 2 right now, so we'll see. Oh, I also had Love and Other Disasters on here. I guess I didn't read it in February. Oh, and my next section is called Library Reads, so I have a feeling I have probably not read these. This might be the first set of books that I haven't read yet. Okay, Like Other Girls by Britta London, I have read that book. It was really good. It's a solid queer YA book. The Sea is Salt and So Am I by Cassandra Hart, I have indeed read that one as well. Lost in the Neverwoods by Aidan Thomas, I read. Okay, I'm doing better than I thought. Oh, we have our very first book that I put on a TBR that I have not read, The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. I do have this one on NetGalley, and I really need to do like a NetGalley clear out vlog or something, so I might do that in early 2023 and get this one read. We'll see. I'm sure that's what I was trying to do in this TBR as well, and we know how that turned out. All right, book number 1 I haven't read yet. Oh, and right into book number 2, Normal People by Sally Rooney. I think I was thinking about doing a Sally Rooney reading vlog because I've never read her before and she's so popular, but I don't think that's the direction I want to take my channel in. I still might read Normal People eventually. I do own it in a hard copy, I think. I don't know why I wasn't showing it the hard copy, but so maybe eventually, but again, have not read this one. Next, I talked about Thanks a Lot Universe by Chad Lucas. I did end up reading this one. May the Best Man Win by Z.R. Eller. I have not read, so number 3 that I have not read. I definitely think that's what I was doing, is I was gonna try and do a NetGalley clear out, and I did a lot in 2022, but I didn't succeed completely, so that's what these books are for. I also had Real Life by Brandon Taylor checked out, and I have not read this one. I do think that this is one that I am still interested in reading eventually. It just hasn't fit into my reading plans this year at all, so maybe in the future, but not right now. And last but not least, it looks like I had Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney checked out. I had so many plans in March that I didn't see through, I guess, and this book was one of the victims of that. So I have not read Conversations with Friends either, so that's 5 books so far that I put on my March TBR that I have not read. Oh, and then I was talking about the Sugar and Spice book club, which I definitely have not read any books for that since Reminders of Him. So Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, I have not read. Will I ever read it? I don't know. Straight romance isn't really my jam, and I've really like solidified that this year, so I'm not sure. We will see. I do own it though. Alright, and I guess in order to read Hook, Line, and Sinker, I wanted to read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Again, I have not read this one for the same reasons that I have not read Hook, Line, and Sinker. I do own this one as well though, so maybe in the future, I don't know. Maybe it would be fun to do a reading vlog kind of like Kayla did, of reading the books that I put on my TBRs that I didn't read. I feel like I'm more interested in this one than some of the other ones, so we'll see. Now we're up to 7. Alright, and then the last book that I had on this TBR was the next book in the Frat Wars series by Saxon James, Master of Mayhem. Of course I read this one. Don't you worry, I read this one. Alright, so in terms of new books that I included on this March TBR that weren't on my January or February TBRs, there was 11 new books and I've only read 5 of them. So that means there are 6 books on this TBR that I have never read. That's interesting and definitely not as good. Let's move on to my April TBR. Alright, my first category is book clubs and read-alongs, so hopefully I've read most of these books that I've listed in here. And the first one, The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, I read this with the Fantasy Series Book Club, so this one is a check. And then my next book that I listed was ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas, because Amanda and I did we kind of did an ACOTAR read-along that we started, but then we both, I think, DNF ACOWAR. So we didn't end up continuing the read-along, but I did read A Court of Thorns and Roses, so that's good. Well, I mean, it really wasn't good, but good for the concept of this video. Alright, and then my next category was NetGalley Reads, so I think it's going to be a lot of repeats from the last video. Okay, this is a new one, but Everyone Dies Famous in a Small Town by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. I have indeed read this one. Then I had In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. I also read this one. Alright, I also have So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens. I can't tell if this was like on my official TBR, if I was just talking about it because I was talking about In Deeper Waters, but I've also read this one, so I'm gonna count it. And then The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris shows up again. Still haven't read it. Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. I have read. One of the most mid-thrillers I read all year, but I have read it. And May the Best Man Win shows up again. The Sea of Salt and So Am I shows up again. Oh, Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur. I have indeed read this book. I really liked it. One of my favorite sapphic romance that I've read this year. So that one gets to check off the list. I mentioned Lost in the Neverwoods again. I have read that one. It Had to Be You by Georgia Clark is a book that I have not read yet still, so that one gets added to the list, unfortunately. Alright, and then The Spanish Love Deception shows up again on this list. At least it looks like I have started it in this video, so that's good. Oh, Ugly Love's on here again too. That's fun. We also have Regretting You again. I have read that one. Oh, and Love and Other Disaster shows up again. Why did I think that I had read that one in February? That's kind of shocking to me. Okay, I still have read it, but I must not have read it until April. Oh, and of course, here again we have I'm So Not Over You, as well as Delilah Green. I told you they were going to show up quite a few times. Oh, and then I guess that I did not read Frat Wars Master of Mayhem in March. I read it in April, but I have read it. Oh, and then I had The Barbarian's Vow by Kira Andrews on my TBR in April. I have read this book. I love this duology. It's so good. And then I had Madman by Only James on this list. That was the 5th book in the Necessary Evil series. I did read that book. Don't you worry. Oh, and then I have Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score on this because I think me, Amanda, and Kara were planning to buddy read this book this year. It never happened. I'm not sure if any of us have read it. I don't really think I'm super interested in reading it anymore. So yeah, haven't read this one. Alright, and that was everything on my April TBR. So let's count up how many new books were on this one. If we count So This Is Ever After, there's 11 books on this list that are new that I didn't feature in previous TBRs, and I've read 8 of them. So there's only 3 on this list that are new that I haven't read yet. That's not too bad. 8 of 11 isn't too bad. Next, we can look at my May TBR. We can already see Delilah Green there in the thumbnail, so All right, the first section is TBR carryover, where I again talked about The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. Looks like I talked about Written in the Stars as well as I'm So Not Over You. Just scrubbing through, I don't see any other books, so I don't know. I don't know if I talked about anything else. First new book I'm talking about is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. I have read that. It looks like I mentioned The Dragon Republic again. I probably finished it in the beginning of the month. For the Fantasy Series Book Club, I have read both of these. And then I'm talking about Akamath. I have read Akamath. I wish that I haven't read Akamath, but I have read Akamath. Oh, and then I mentioned Something Wilder by Christina Lauren, probably because I wanted to read it for the Sugar and Spice Book Club, which Sarah, Amanda, and Lachlan host. I did not end up reading this though. Again, with the straight romance, it's just not something I want to reach for, so I didn't reach for it, and I probably won't read this book. And then I talked about Things We Never Got Over again. Then my next section was called Queer New Releases. The first one I talked about is I Kissed Cher Wheeler by Casey McQuiston, and I did read this book this year. And then I'm talking about So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens again, which I did end up reading. I actually read this book in a reading vlog where I read 5 queer SFF books. This is definitely one of my favorite videos that I did this year. I loved it, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. And then I mentioned Madman by Only James again. I have read this one. Oh, and then we're getting into the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne. I had Gloam on this month's TBR, and I have read this book. And I also had Moth on this TBR. Oh my gosh, imagine a Jess who hadn't read Moth yet. That's crazy. But I did read this one. One of my favorite books of the year. Definitely one of my favorite KU romances of all time. Oh, it's so freaking good. And then I have a section of female romances. The first one here is The Devil Wears Tartan by Katya Rose. This is a contemporary KU female romance, enemies to lovers. I am planning to read this one before the end of the year, but as of filming this video at the end of November, I haven't read it yet. Planning to read it though before the end of the year because I want to see if it should go on my enemies to lovers recommendation video that I'm going to film for this month. So this one will get read. It just hasn't been read yet as of filming this video. And then I had A Little Light Mischief by Kat Sebastian. I have read this one. I read it in a 24-hour reading vlog back in, I think I read it in June, but I've still read it. And then The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. I did read this book this year. Oh my god, I love it. Such a beautiful romance. Obsessed. And I think that was it. All right, that was everything on my May TBR. Let's count them up, see what my stats are now. Looks like I have 9 new books on this TBR that I hadn't mentioned previously. And of those 9, I've read 7. So that's pretty good. 7 of 9 read in May. All right, let's look at my June TBR next. The first book that I mentioned is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I have read this book for the Fantasy Series Book Club. Check. Next book I mentioned was Aquawar, and like I said earlier in this video, I did DNF Aquawar. I read it for the purposes of this video, but of course I didn't finish it. Next I had Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which I have not read. And do I plan to? Not really. So I think again this was another Sugar and Spice Book Club pick that I didn't get to because I just don't want to pick up straight romance ever. And that's just something I learned about myself in 2022, and that's okay. The rest of this video is all queer books for Pride Month. First I have the first 4 volumes of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, and I did read all of these books in June. I read them in a 24-hour reading vlog, and of course I love them to death. They were rereads for me, but so good. Oh, I have not read A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is another one that I am planning to read before the end of the year. It will get done, I promise, but as of filming this video, I have not read this book yet. Oh, and here we can see me descend into the Omegaverse circle of hell. My very first Omegaverse book, I believe. And after that, the rest is history. Of course, I have read this one, The Alpha's Warlock by Elliot Grayson. Check, read it. Captive Mate by Elliot Grayson is the second book in her Mismatched Mates series that starts with the Alpha's Warlock, and I have read this one as well. I've read this entire series this year, so yeah, definitely read it. Next was A Very Armitage Christmas, which is a novella that takes place in that Mismatched Mates series. I read this one as well. And then I mentioned The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite again. I have indeed read this book. And there's Delilah Green yet again. I've read her. It just took me a long time for some reason. And then I Kissed Cher Wheeler by Casey McQuiston appears again. I did read this book. I think I actually read this one in June. Oh, and then we have Boyfriend Goals by Riley Hart. I ended up DNFing this book, but for the purposes of this video, I did read this. Then we have Home Field Advantage by Dahlia Adler. I read this one as well. It was super cute. Oh no, and then I have Hazel Bly and the Deep Blue Sea by Ashley Herring Blake. The fact that I haven't read this book yet is criminal Why have I not read this book? I don't know. I need to just like buy it so I have it so I can read it. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I have not read this one. So You'll Be 9 by Lucy Lennox is another book that I have indeed read. I hated this book, but I did read it. Oh, and then we have A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I ended up DNFing this book, but again, I've read it for the purposes of this video. Ooh, King of the Dragonflies by Case and Callender, another one that I've read this year. One of my favorites of the year, and perhaps one of the like 3 books that made me absolutely sob my eyes out this year. So good, so beautiful. I love this book so much. Oh my god, and then Winter's Orbit appears. Another favorite of the year. I love this book so much. I love it so much. I'm currently reading Ocean's Echo as we're filming this video. So good. So very good. I'm obsessed. But yes, I've read this one, of course. Oh, and then I'm So Not Over You. Pierce again. And we also have Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I have read this one. Off Balance by Jay Hogan. I have not read, actually. This is a male-male KU romance. Actually, I think it might not be on KU. I think maybe I had to buy it, which is why I didn't read it. And then The Devil Wears Tartan and A Little Light Mischief appeared again. Have not read The Devil Wears Tartan, have read A Little Light Mischief. And those are all the books on my June TBR. Let me do some math really quick. All right, I mentioned 20 new books in this video, which is a lot. And of those 20 books, I have actually read 16. So there's only 4 I haven't read of those 20, which is still honestly pretty good. So I read 16 of those. Next, let's look at my July TBR. Now, I know that this one, I think was, actually no, it might be in August when I go to the library and get a bunch of thrillers that I haven't read. I don't even know what's on here. Let's just see. Okay, the first book is Jade Ward by Fonda Lee. I have indeed read this one for the Fantasy Series Book Club. We have Akawar appear again. I have read this one. Well, I DNF'd it, but I've read it. Even though it was a DNF, it counts. Oh, and then I have A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, which I most definitely have not read. So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens appears yet again. That's the 3rd time, I think. And then we have Before We Disappear by Sean David Hutchinson. This was another book that I read in my Queer SFF fantasy vlog, so I have indeed read this one. Same goes for Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This was also featured in that vlog. One of my favorites of the year. Made me sob my eyes out, so I've definitely read this one. Okay, maybe this was when I was planning to read some thrillers, because I have The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I have not read this book. And then we have Sundial by Catronia Ward. I have not read this one either. Next is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. No. Breathless by Amy McCulloch. No. Okay, and then I have a section of books that I like recently hauled. The first one I have is Total Creative Control by Sally Malcolm and Joanna Chambers, and I did read this one. I also have Never Been Kissed by Timothy Janofsky. I have read this one as well. Didn't like it, but I read it. Out of Character by Annabeth Albert is one that I have not read. The Perks of Loving a Wallflower by Erica Ridley is another book that is on my end of year TBR and will be read before the end of the year, but as of now I have not read it yet. And then I had a currently reading section, so I mentioned A Dowry of Blood again. I DNF'd it, but I read it. I'm So Not Over You appears again, and I think that was it. So let's add those up. Featured 12 unique books on my July TBR, and of those 12, I've read 5. Oh my gosh, 5 of 12. That's the same as March was, so not the worst, but tied for the worst. Pretty bad. Actually, March was 5 of 11, so it is the worst. Alright, so we just have 2 more to go. Next is my August TBR. Again, with there being books in the thumbnail that I have not read yet. Alright, the first book I have on here is The Diviners by Liva Bray. I have read this one for the Fantasy Series Book Club. Next, my Twilight read-along started with Sarah and some of my other friends here on BookTube. Read Twilight in August. I've read this one. Oh, and then I was a very bad co-host of the Studio Ghibli readathon. I definitely did not read my TBR for this readathon. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. I definitely have not read. Oh, and then I mentioned Frat Wars Presidential Chaos by Saxon James. I have read this book. Of course, I've read all of the books with naked men on the covers. Why would I not read those? Ooh, and then I had Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon, which I had a cool video idea where I was gonna like read books by authors who I previously hated, like giving authors I hated a second chance. And I like the idea of that video, but I don't like the idea of forcing myself to read books that I think I'm gonna hate. Because it wasn't like I had picked books that I think I would like. It was like I picked new books by the authors that I gave my least favorite book of the year for the past 2 years to. I just don't think that that was really a good idea or like a fun thing for me to do. So I have decided to scrap that, and I think I'm not on all this book. So yeah. No, I have not read this one. The other book that I was going to plan to read for that video was One Night on the Island by Josie Silver, and I have not read this one either, nor do I want to. Oh, okay. Next, I think that I was going to do a reading vlog of the Game Changers series by Rachel Reed, and I'm still kind of going to do that, except I'm just going to read Heated Rivalry and The Long Game because those are the 2 that I want to read. So I have read Heated Rivalry before, but I haven't read The Long Game, which is the direct sequel to Heated Rivalry. So that's what I was talking about here. So I have not read Game Changer. Again, I haven't read Heated Rivalry yet this year. I read it last year. Tough Guy, no. Role Model, no. A Long Game, no. But again, I'm gonna read 2 of them, but haven't read the rest of them. Oh, and here we're back at NetGalley. So I think we're just gonna mention other books that I've already read. Maybe. Oh no. Okay. We just talked about Self-Made Boys by Anna Marie McLemore because I think that's the only one I have on there that's come out this year. It came out like around the time when I was filming this video. I haven't read it though. I'm so bad at NetGalley. I have not read this book, but I do want to read this one. I think it'll be good because it's like a queer remixed Great Gatsby retelling. So I think it would be fun, but I haven't read it yet. Then I had a section of rom-coms. What that means, I'm not sure. The first one is Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I have not read this one, but again, this one is one that's on my end of the year TBR, so it should be read by the end of December. It just is not read currently. And then I was just showing all the books on my floor for some reason. I don't know what the hell I was doing in this video. Oh, I think I was like picking out books that I could take with me to work or something because I like to have like paperback books at work. That's definitely what I was doing. Okay. Hi, editing Jess here. I did not plan to be wearing the same sweatshirt, but I guess I'm glad I am for continuity's sake. When I was filming this video, I ran out of space on my phone and it cut out a lot more than I thought it did. I'm just gonna give you a quick summary of like the footage that I lost. So I was at the end of my August TBR just going through the last couple paperback books that I had on my TBR. Hang the Moon, which I have read. The Perks of Loving a Wallflower, which I have not read and it was a repeat. Chef's Kiss, which I have not read. I talked about A Lady for a Duke again, which I still haven't read. Alright, so in my August TBR, I mentioned a total of 16 unique books, and I had only read 4 of them, so that's pretty abysmal. And then I jumped into my September TBR, and I think that's where my new footage picks up, so we'll go and start there. Just kidding, I missed quite a few more. The Madhouse, which I have not read. Lunatic, which I have read. Tristix Venom, which I have not read but plan to before the end of the year. Seraph by Lily Mayne, which I have read. And now we are caught up. Sorry about the lighting change. I did run out of space on my phone, so I had to spend the last way too long deleting stuff. So we're back and we're almost finished, so let's power through. Okay, The Final Masquerade by Ariana Nash. I have not read that book. Then I have 2 more books in the Mismatched Mates series by Elliot Grayson. I have read both of these, Lost and Bound and Lost Touch I have read, so that's good. Ooh, then I have The Paladin's Shadow by TBR Lark, which I have not read. And I'm not planning to read it before the end of the year. That doesn't mean I won't because I don't really have any plans to read any KU books for the rest of the year, but will I be able to do that? Probably not. So we'll see. This one definitely is on my list still, but it has not been read yet. Oh, and then I had the 3 Neon Gods books where I guess the series is called Dark Olympus by Katie Robert. First book is Neon Gods, the second book is Electric Idol, and the third book is Wicked Beauty. And I have read all 3 of these. I actually did a reading vlog on them if you would like to check it out. Unfortunately, I did not like any of them and I did end up DNFing Wicked Beauty, but for the purposes of this video, they are all read. All right, and then we have The Diviners pop up again. Both The Diviners and Layer of Dreams by Libba Bray. I, as of filming this video, have read both of these, which is awesome, and I still have to read the rest of the series, but these 2 are read. Then I was talking about New Moon for the Twilight read-along. I have read New Moon. A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. I have not read. I do really want to read this one. I actually think I'm going to put it on my 5-star predictions list for next year because I haven't gotten to it yet, but I think I'm gonna love it and I just don't think I can fit it in for the end of the year. Oh, and then Joy, I have some thrillers on here. Definitely haven't read these. I can see The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, which I talked about in the last video. Still haven't read it. The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. Have not read that one. Daisy Darker by Alice Sweeney. Have not read that one. And then these are the books that I got from the library. So The Night Shift by Alex Finley. Haven't read. Returned it without reading it. Insomnia by Sarah Pinbrough. Did not read this one. Returned it without reading it. Stay Awake by Megan Golden. I actually did read this one, but it was like the only one that I read. All right, and those are all the books that were on my September TBR. I think I had 20 unique books on this list, and I only have read, okay, I've actually read 11 of them, which is better than I thought. Still not great though. So across all of the TBRs that I made in 2022, from January through September, I put a total of 126 unique books on those TBRs, and of those 126 books, I ended up reading 83 of them, which honestly doesn't seem that bad. It's a success rate of about 66%, 86%, so not horrible. I'm definitely reading more than half of the books that I put on my TBR, and I feel like going forward next year, I can make this even better. I am planning to do TBRs next year. I think I'm gonna do the style of like I did in August, where I like take you through planning my month and my TBR with me. I think I'm almost gonna do like a bookish monthly reset kind of vibe videos as kind of my tentative plan for next year. So those will be super fun. Look out for those. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested. But yeah, I feel like I learned a lot about my reading taste throughout the year, and I can really see that in my TBRs because the books that I knew I was gonna love and that I was really excited about reading are the books that I read. And the books that now I would not put on TBRs are the books that I didn't read. That is successful in that I found more of my niche, more of my vibe this year than I feel like I had in years previous. So I'm happy about that. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with how much of these books that I've read. If you are interested in seeing me do a reading vlog, maybe picking some of these books that I haven't read yet, definitely let me know in the comments. That would be something I might do next year if you're interested, so let me know. And yes, I think that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. And if you're here for bookmas content, definitely leave me Christmas emojis. And if you want to see more bookish content from me, I'm posting a new video every single day in December. Definitely subscribe for more from me. Like this video if you liked it. You can also follow me on Instagram and Goodreads in the description, linked in the description down below if you are so interested. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely holiday season, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.